In the last section, we just about finished up our search artist query. I say just about because I do want to mention that we still have one little issue inside of our query. You'll notice that up here at the top where we make our query, we are finding a subset of all of our artists with this build query thing right here. So in theory, we can get a result set far less than the full like 7 or 17 or 17,000 artists that we have in our database. And that might be what we're actually returning from here, right? However, our promise is currently returning the entire list or the entire count of the entire artist collection. And you may or may not have noticed that that's going to be a little bit of an issue when we look down at this paginator. For example, if I filter down my search criteria to just Dawn, I see page 1 and 12 records found, even though there's clearly only one record on here. So I think that the way in which our artist.count function right here is working isn't quite perfect just yet. I want to move on to the set retired and set not retired queries, and then we're going to come back to this and fix it later on after we start to add in many more artists, like several thousand more. Once we get a several thousand more, the behavior of this paginator at the bottom has become a little bit more apparent, and so it makes sense to wait to fix it until that point in time. Okay, so let's pivot, and we're going to start working on the two retired functions. I'm going to close all the files I have open, and then I'm going to open up set retired and set not retired. So as you might guess, these work in just about the opposite of each other. Okay, just about the opposite. If I open our application back up, and then I get my big old list of users on the screen, the users who have a background, or the artists who have a background of gray, are the ones who are considered to be retired inside our application. And by retired, I mean they're not making music anymore. The users, or the artists in white, however, are not retired. If we look at RoboMongo, we'll see that every single user has a retired flag that is either true or false. So either you're retired or you're not. It's a Boolean, that's it. If we open our application back up and then start selecting some of these different users, you'll see that we get retire or unretire pop up. So in essence, we need to somehow take a list of users and update the retired property on every single one of them to either retire them or unretire them. Note that it's perfectly valid inside this application to try to retire an already retired artist. Like we're allowing that, we're saying that's totally fine to do. So let's take a look at the function and see what we have to work with. I'm inside of the set retired function right now, so we'll start off with set retired, and then we'll implement set not retired. Again, the two of them are going to be nearly identical. So inside of here, we've got some documentation, sets a group of artists as retired. The argument to this is going to be an array of IDs. So it's going to be an array of every artist that we need to update. Then the expected return value is a promise that resolves after the update. So basically just something that says, hey, we're all done, like go for it, whatever you want to do now. So it's going to be up to you inside of this function to write out a query that's going to look at all these different IDs and update the appropriate users. Now, a couple quick notes that I want to throw out there. First, I want to steer your direction away. Like if you're considering to do something like IDs dot for each, and then you're going to take every ID and then fetch, find by ID, update it, and then save it. Not the direction we want to go. Okay, so we're not going to find every record in a loop and then update it and save it. We want to do all of our updates in one big go. Okay, so that's big note number one. Big note number two is going to be a lot more tricky. So we have an example of something exactly like this inside of the user's application we had been working on before, but we left off one extraordinarily important detail. Okay, we left off one extraordinarily important detail. So if you implement this query and then you attempt to test it and you notice that it's only seeming to update like a single artist, maybe that isn't quite what we expect, okay? So I'm going to encourage you to do your best shot at implementing this query. If it doesn't work exactly the way you expect, that's totally fine. We'll solve it in the next section, but I'm also going to encourage you to take a quick glance at some of the Mongoose documentation, which you can find at mongoosejs.com/docs, and maybe see, look at some of the different API methods in here, see if you can't figure out why update is only updating one record at a time. So let's take a quick break. You'll go ahead and give us a shot, and we'll come back and solve this problem.